What can you share? What lessons could you impart that could be related to meeting professionals that deal with budgets, planning, projections, attendance, justifying return on investment for some of these events that cost so much? Just bring us into your view of that world and what you could impart to them.
I think live events are amazing because I do believe that it is really the fabric of how professionals like to connect with one another. And I think that generally speaking, depending on the event, having an engaging speaker or having a person who can help bring to the audience some awesome content is really great. Now, I mean, it's weird because I have two sides to this. One is I've obviously been an attendee to many a conference because I was in financial services for many years, and I basically would think that they're mostly pretty boring. And even the people who are extremely smart and wonderful to read are not the greatest speakers. And Seth, as you know, the art of bringing an audience to life is an art. It is not a science. So I think that if you are considering content that would, I think generally be seen as more professional content, you still want somebody who can take the best of the brains that you have and bring it to the audience in a way the audience can absorb it. So in my world, sometimes I will be asked to do a more technical conference, right? So, hey, Jill, we've got a bunch of CPAs in the audience, and we need you to do a fun interview, but also a serious interview. And, I think that the fun interviews are more challenging for me because it's not my lane. So, I'll scorch the earth. I'll do the research. I'll make sure I know everything I need to know about Coach K, who I interviewed in front of 2,000 CPAs. But if I have to take somebody who's doing practice management for an organization, that to me is more comfortable in many ways. And then I can let somebody else be the expert and let that person shine. And so I think what many people don't realize about the content, which really is important, is that you really need to bring the content and make it live. And that is half science, half art, and making sure you have the right people up on that stage to connect with your audience is really going to justify the expense, or you're going to feel like you threw your money out the window.
That's what we do here, Jill. When we brought you in to moderate with Julie Andrews, did you hear the mic drop? Because that was a name drop right there.
Yeah, it was great. Dame Julie Andrews.
Julie Andrews, pardon me, who, by the way, and this is corroborated by you, she's more Mary Poppins than Mary Poppins herself.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I learned a ton in that interview process. And, what happened was there was a financial services firm that wanted to have a big event. And I think what they really wanted was somebody who could do a one-on-one high-profile interview that would be fun for the audience, but also be able to schmooze with the audience and be comfortable doing that. So, Seth, if you remember, one of the things that was interesting about that whole weekend was that they wanted me to be at a luncheon with the female finance professionals, or do drinks with and that's something I think that the person who's doing the interviewing, if you have some comfort level, like, it's nice to know who the audience is. So, the other part of that which was still by far the very best interview I've ever done. I mean, I can't imagine it ever being bested. I learned a lot in that interview process because we were doing pre-interviews, and Jules, as I've come to know that she is referred to as, Dame Julie Andrews, had somebody who was very protective of her in a wonderful way, a longtime agent who was very clear about what could and could not be asked. And what was fascinating in that, I'm sure you remember this, Seth, that we had like a pre-interview call, and it was like, don't talk about this, don't talk about this. Very curt, very, doing his job. But, when I met her backstage before we went on, it was like a different human being that we were talking about. It was somebody who was just a kind, open-hearted person. Some of the topics that the agent said, you cannot bring this up or this up, she brought up herself. And so I think that in many respects, that interview was so instructive for me because I was interviewing an idol, but I treated it with great respect. I did a ton of research, And I wanted to make sure that it was fun for everybody who was watching. And Seth, you actually gave me great advice on this because you said, look, a lot of people in this audience who are of a certain age will say, that's Mary Poppins. That's, that's Julie Andrews from The Sound of Music. And then you reminded me that there were also younger people in the audience who were like, no, they know her from The Princess Diaries or from her children's books. And so, you're trying to weave a narrative through a beginning, middle, and end to a story over the course of 45 minutes that engaged everybody. And there was, I will admit to you, that 5-minute indulgence where I went on a Sondheim rant with Julie Andrews that was amazing. But I did turn to the audience and said, okay, we're about to go down a Sondheim rabbit hole. Hang in there. We'll be back in 5 minutes, which was great. And I do think that you want to make the interview fun for the audience and for the person who's being interviewed. And she was such a champ, such a pro. And she didn't, I'm sure that there are some people who might do this. And, after being at CBS News now for, 15 years, that I've met plenty of people in the green room who you can see they're just sleepwalking through it, right?
Yeah.
They're going on a press junket. I think you should be very careful about the people you hire as the people who are like the talent or the big interview, because you really want to make sure they want to be there for more than the paycheck. And she made that day come alive for the audience members, for me, and she actually generally had a good time. Why do I know that? Because 8 years later, I became acquainted with her through another person who knew her. And she says, oh, yeah, I remember that event. That was a great event.